it.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody. Hello. Thanks for coming. I'm Ryan Ada. And let's quickly introduce the panel. So we've got Sean O'Connor here. Can you hear okay? We need to use the mic. Check. There you are.
Okay, so this is Sean O'Connor. Do you want to introduce yourself and just go down?
Hey, I'm Sean O'Connor. I'm a filmmaker, photographer for the last 17 years, and I'm a film educator. So we spend a lot of time in schools with students teaching them film, and this has become one of our major tools for getting in the hands of students for storytelling.
And shamelessly plug the business.
Michael Lano, criminal defense lawyer. I'm who you call after you crash your drone into people. My name is Ben Leapoff. I'm the owner and operator of Easy Drone. We're a drone shop just on 17th and Lovejoy. We sell, service, and train pretty much every single platform, and we help people get their FAA Part 107 license for drone operation.
Hello, I'm Terry. I'm one of the instructors that works for them, and then I also do some of the repair work.
So as you can see up here, the format for this presentation today is it's an hour and a half, so 90-minute presentation. I promise you it'll be very engaging. Unfortunately, I had so much information to share and so many fun short films to share that the actual presentation is going to take about an hour or maybe a little more, an hour and 10. So lots of fun videos to show off regarding drone cinematography. At the end of that, we're going to go into hopefully about a 30-minute Q&A with these guys, and the workshop's going to be mostly about cinematography and the aspects of how to use drones in the context of mostly narrative film is kind of what I'm going for, although documentary is going to be a no-brainer. And then the last part of the presentation you will see, I'm just going to fly through the slides. They're all technical slides, and I thought we'll let these guys answer questions that you have about technical stuff, but this presentation is being filmed and will be online. And if you just go to ryanao.com, it will be very obvious up on the front of the website on how to view the presentation. So just keep that in mind as I fly through the slides and you're like, wait, stop! And then the other question that I want to ask you guys is everybody okay with waiting till the Q&A to ask questions? You guys cool with that? That would help us get to the Q&A faster, so thank you. Alright, so just a quick little outline. There's some drone cinematography projects we're going to show off today, including Soul Oregon V2. I premiered Soul Oregon V1 at the film festival on Friday. It had a wonderful reception. That film's actually about a year old, so in the past year I've been working on V2, and we're going to premiere it here today. So that's going to be fun. So then, as you can see, I'm just going to let you read what the rest of it entails, but that's more of the kind of stuff you'll see online later. A little background on me, I have 20 years in the film industry, and for about the past 2 years I've been flying drones as a hobbyist, and my disclaimer is I am not an FAA Part 107 drone operator yet. But so a lot of the clips that you've seen on there may look, hey, isn't that required a permit? Well, yeah, 2 years ago when I first started and I was a hobbyist, I didn't know the rules. So, but hey, I got the shots and they're pretty cool. But I highly recommend talking to these guys and me during the Q&A about what it takes to be a Part 107 and the legalities regarding all that. Yeah, so let's get started with Soul Oregon V2. I wanted to point out too that the soundtrack is brand new. It's amazing, and Brent McCune is sitting right here. He's the composer. He's my cousin. Distant second cousin or something like that, yeah. So, anyways, whatever, we're cousins. And this will be submitted to the Portland airport. They have the Hollywood Theater there now. That's like a 10-person theater or something, so while you're waiting for your plane flights, go check it out. It will hopefully get accepted and we'll be playing there. So, check it out. Here we go. Alright, thanks for watching that. That was the world premiere of that. And we got some fun topics to talk about legalities of some of those shots. So let's bring it up afterwards. Maybe Michael can answer this. I'm going to move on to the next short film that I was involved with. It's actually a 1-minute horror comedy, and we shot it in one day. And we used the drone for some shots, which I'll let you pick out, and then so look for 2 of them. And then there's a little behind the scenes afterwards we'll watch.
You're home early. Oh God, is this your first one? Yeah. And in broad daylight? Yeah. Never mind. I have so much to teach you.
So I don't know if you noticed, but the establishing shot, the beginning one, which is commonly a helicopter shot, which now can be done with drone shots, we did that with the drone. And then the night shot was actually done with the drone, which is not recommended because drones, especially these, don't get really good crispness at night. But we pulled it off. So I'll show you a little bit of behind the scenes on that one.
Get out of my head, out of my head, out of my head now. Get out of my head, get into my heart. Rolling! Get out of my head, out of my head, out of my head now. Get out of my head, get into my heart.
A little director commentary here. That shot was, we had to do it like 8 times because the girl was under 16. She didn't have her license. She wasn't jumping the car very well. It matched her driving with the drug.
Without me, you be stuck in a pattern, and without me, you see, it doesn't matter who you're mad at. I've had that happen, and I won't have it anymore. Why don't you go? Boom, boom, boom. Give it love, give it love, give it love now. Boom, boom, boom. When you get it back, let me get it back. Get out of my head, out of my head, out of my head now. Get out of my head, get into my heart. Get out of my head, out of my head, out of my head now. Get out of my head, get into my heart. Get into my heart. The light changed inside, so I went up into the mountains and climbed. I got away from all the static. In the sadness, I won't be caught up in that anymore. Why don't it go? Give it love, give it love, give it love now. That's a dead body. When you get it back. Give it love, give it love, give it love now. When you get it back, and you get it. Get out of my head, out of my head, out of my head now. Get out of my head, get into
Natalie, that is the face of a killer.
Get out of my head, out of my head, out of my head now. Get out of my head.
Maybe Bob did it. Yeah.
Maybe Bob did it.
Maybe Bob did it. Bob. Star.
Brought back from the dead.
And there was a real estate agent that was giving us dirty looks. And
Shot. Yeah, this is really cool.
And Pat's here. I didn't even see you. Pat was the star of the water ski shots in V2. Thank you for doing that. And Brad over here was part of some of the other water ski shots. Fun to have you guys here. So this is, let me pause that for a sec. This is one of my favorite projects ever created with a drone. So DJI, this company that makes all the drones that are on the table up here, and pretty much I would say, back me up here guys, the leading drone company in the market right now.
They're the Apple of the drone world.
They're like the Apple of the drone world, yeah. I mean, look at this. Doesn't it look sexy and fancy? They funded a film that was created by Academy Award winning director of photography, and his name is Claude, what is it? I can't read it. The Claude something. You'll see in the BTS. And then it was starring Ryan Fleet and perfectly timed too, Noah Schnapp, who is he's Will in Stranger Things. And so they made this whole film. It's an 8-minute film on the DJI Inspire series, which none of us have up here. It's the big drone that has its own cinema camera built into it. And the point of this film was to prove that cinema cameras are being built into drones now, and the raw format that shoots 6.5K is good enough to hold up in Hollywood, and so much that you can film the whole entire film on the drone. And so watch the film, and then we're going to watch this amazing behind the scenes afterwards, which basically explained everything I wanted to explain to you guys today for me, so I don't have to do it. But basically, my point with this workshop today is just this, that your lens as a storyteller has now become untethered in such an affordable way that all indie filmmakers should be considering getting into drone or having somebody in your circle that has a drone shooting with you on projects. Enough said.
Lucas! Come here. It's good seeing you, son.
It's good seeing you too.
I'm sorry about your mother. She was a good woman.
Yes, sir.
You can call me Dad.
Yes, Dad.
Son, I know I haven't been there, but I want to make it up to you. I want to be a father.
I'd like that.
But Lucas, I can't have any trouble. Your Aunt Ruth said you were...
Oh, no, there won't be any trouble. You have my word. I don't want to go back to living with her. I want to be with you.
Then we have a deal. I want to see something. Draw a circle.
Just a circle?
Yes, with one stroke.
How big?
You decide. Very good, Lucas. There was an artist named Giotto. This is almost 700 years ago. He was from Florence, Italy. And the Pope, whose name escapes me, sent a messenger to Giotto asking for a drawing to demonstrate Giotto's skill. Giotto drew, in red paint, a perfect circle. I mean, so perfect you would have assumed he used a compass. But he didn't. And he gave that circle to the messenger to take back to the Pope. Now, the messenger, legend has it, was offended, thinking Giotto just scribbled something. But when the Pope saw the circle, he understood. The natural talent. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Just drawing a circle. But to draw a perfect circle.
So, how was mine?
It was very good. You showed real promise. But your mom, she could draw a perfect circle.
It's beautiful, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much.
Just like you.
Who's next? Today was a good day, Lucas. Today was a very good day. And since you're apparently my good luck charm now, I think we're both entitled to an ice cream. No? Okay.
Oh, no. Yes. Yeah.
Art endures, Lucas. That's why we sacrifice for it. Laws change and money disappears and buildings fall. Giotto, you could go right now and see his frescoes in the Scrivani Chapel in Italy. Because art endures.
So then why didn't Mom ever paint?
Survival comes first.
I still feel her. In the little things.
I do too.
They stole it.
We don't know that.
I know it.
Hey, Lucas!
I know what you stole from my dad. Give it back.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Give it back or I'm going to hurt you.
I don't know what town you blew in from, kid, but you better blow right on out.
I'm happy to leave, but it's going to be with all my dad's supplies.
Come on, little twit, let's go!
Oh, where is it? Where is it? Come on!
All right. Sarah. We gotta give it back.
Why?
Because it's not ours.
You said you bought it.
I didn't. It's not ours. I'm sorry.
Draw a circle.
like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done, huh? Good. Okay, a few keywords here to listen for in the behind the scenes. As I want you guys to start thinking like drones are cinematic tools, and they're going to be talking about that here. Basically, this film was proof of concept that an excellent production can be made completely with the minimal camera cost. For 6.5K cinema raw cameras start at like $10,000–$15,000 with that drone. I don't know, it's what, $5,000 drone? The $10,000 is
about $6,000. Yeah. The drone itself is $3,000, and the camera they're using is $2,500.
Okay. But then to maybe rent a drone operator who already owns one could even cost a lot less. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, camera raw, awesome. This Inspire is pretty much.
The Circle is a narrative short film set in the Great Depression era. It's a father-son story about a starving artist, the father, who makes a living off of sketching street portraits of people. He is reunited with his son when he finally has the means to support him, or so he thinks he does.
Today was a very good
So here we have the father who is a creative person who lives his life based off of creativity and artistic endeavors as opposed to monetary and materialistic endeavors. And he picks up his son and he tries to instill those values in him.
Draw a circle.
Just a circle?
Yes, with one stroke.
How big?
You decide.
I haven't seen my father in a long time. My mother's died, and he's a really good artist. It's kind of like I find the kids and I beat them up.
I know what you stole from my dad. Give it back.
Filmmaking has been tethered to the ground for so long, and we've done things relatively the same way for the last 20, 30 years. And DJI, with their equipment, with their technology, is sort of allowing filmmaking to be freed.
What's unique about this particular film shoot is that we're using new technology to really push the limits of camera language and storytelling. Every single shot in this film is shot with the Inspire 2.
It was kind of an interesting way to kind of figure out a new way to kind of shoot this spot, and I'm always up for a challenge, so I think that's kind of an interesting way to do it. And we kind of figured out ways of moving the camera. We put the drone on dollies, and I have this almost like a free remote head, which is kind of an interesting way too. We've done some shots of coming down into a bed where I just tilt down and I have this lightweight remote head and just need a couple little pulleys, and it kind of made this really simple shot easily. And if it had been a bigger camera, that would actually been a lot more difficult. We did a shot yesterday where we just transitioned a shot and people kind of wonder how you did it. You know, the drone's coming in for a landing.
So we made 3D printed handles, a specialty made just for this shoot, and these handles allowed an operator to catch the Inspire 2 out of the air and smoothly in the same shot transition into a normal handheld platform.
You have the operator for the bird that kind of brings it down, then you have an operator that can grab the bird and we safely turn it off, and then we kind of bring it into the shot to kind of finish it off in a seamlessly one orchestrated shot. You almost couldn't tell the handoff at all, even though there was, if you look from the outside, the handoff is pretty obvious, but from on camera, I feel it's pretty seamless.
It's been so exciting to see the innovative and imaginative ways Sheldon and Claudio have been using the drone, especially when it comes to interiors, and we're shooting dialogue scenes on it, which is awesome.
Laws change and money disappears and buildings fall. Giotto.
There's the obvious plus side that comes with a drone in terms of the freedom of movement and the beautiful wide open landscape visuals that you get, but then you can have the consistency of that same image if you're using a drone in ways that it's not typically considered to be used.
I think we're both entitled to an ice cream.
The dynamic range on the camera, on the drone itself, and being able to shoot in lower light and using it for both day scenes and night scenes, interiors and exteriors, to me that's something I haven't really seen before.
I hope that people who watch this short film walk away feeling empowered, seeing that the Inspire 2 was crafted to be such a set-friendly, professional cinematography tool inspired us to create this short film. We saw the Inspire 2, we saw the form factor, we saw how small the camera was and said, hey, let's tell a story with it.
If you're not working for a studio and you don't have a $40 million plus budget, you're so limited in terms of what you're able to do, and everything that DJI is putting out in the market kind of reverses that whole trend and flips it on its head to some degree. So we're going to have young filmmakers with not a lot of money making really incredible visual pieces, and a company like DJI makes that possible.
With all this new technology, all these new features, all these new things you can do with the Inspire 2, it still serves one thing: storytelling. And I hope that talented people who watch this film go out and tell their own stories.
One of the things that I was wanting to mention too is, I don't know if you noticed in my movie Blood Ties, when the establishing shot was coming down towards the car and then it landed right at eye level on her and followed her around the car. That was before I found out about, oh, we could have had an operator catch it and walk with it. But Sean's got a story about doing that with kids. It is dangerous though. You notice he was wearing a helmet and gloves. So on that note, I think this film was made right after the DJI Inspire 2 came out, or upon release. And since then, they've made the Osmo, and that camera pops off the Inspire 2 and pops onto the Osmo, so you have a handheld steady camera right now. So that whole film could have been shot totally differently without having to deal with the drone aspect of it, but just popping the camera off and walking around with the camera. So, but although I think that establishing shot still probably would have had to been done with the drone operator.
Yeah, they do it for continuity, so that it's one fluid shot. It goes from air down to somebody walking and then into a house. They have another film that was shot on the Inspire 1 when it was released, which they do a shot that starts on the roof and it travels all the way inside of a church, like downstairs and inside. And in your head, you're like, how do they possibly do that? Because it's one shot, but it's literally a drone coming down and landing in someone's hands, and then they walk with it like it's a regular camera all the way down.
So this is a thing now.
Yeah.
It's a cinematography thing. So, okay, start talking about a new thing. These guys in upstate New York who work out of New York City, they made this film all about, it's called The Light, but it's all about the concept of using the drone as a light. And then, of course, the footage that they shot was shot with the red, but there are some aerial shots in here done with an octocopter with the red on it. And you'll see all that in the DTS, but what I want you guys to pay attention in this is just notice the way the drone lights the environment and moves the light. It's insane. Enjoy.
Thank you.
The goal of this piece was to kind of reinvent cinema lighting. Basically, it goes back to 2015 when our pilot Brad Meyer, he and a couple of co-workers from FreeFly were attaching a LED powered China ball to the Alta 6, and the footage just completely blew me away. That sparked the whole idea.
After a few months, we traveled to upstate New York to test all this out, and we just couldn't believe the results. The problem was the light didn't have quite enough output, and we were pushing 30,000 ISO.
After a lot of testing and building, we finally created a light that had about 10 times as much output. Adding in the new red helium 8K allows us to shoot a clean image at 3200 ISO. And with the support of FreeFly Systems and their new Movi Pro, this is really a game changer for the future of cinema. My name is Tim Sessler.
And I'm Brandon Bray, and here's a behind-the-scenes look at our latest piece, The Light. We wanted to go into a more narrative piece, but really push the abstract while letting the visuals do most of the storytelling.
Our goal was to really stylize this. Oftentimes it was just one or two light sources. For example, on the roof, it's just one flashlight backlighting the character, and then an actual practical police light lighting his face.
And then the rain just made everything more incredible, so
yeah,
we lucked out.
That's just the spirit of the whole project. Even to the degree that at the end of the first night we got the light stuck in a tree.
But I mean, I think that it's worth noting that Tim had built that from scratch, and it was soldered together, and we had one, there was not two, so when the Alta 6 got wrapped up in the top of the tree, we knew that that could be the end of the entire shoot.
We have such limited time that something is changing, and we just have to react to it and make the best out of it. The moving light of the copter just creates this weird effect that nearly looks like a time-lapse image. Like, we're not used to seeing fast-moving lights.
Mixed with the cable cam, there were moments that almost looked like it was completely CGI. We were doing this in real time, and it looked like we had created some fabricated world, and it was all natural. Can you have this super smooth gimbal that we're used to and yet add some kind of a handheld aspect, which the integration with the Mimic sort of changed the game on that front.
You can basically go from a perfectly stable shot to something that feels alive, that feels handheld, that feels completely different. You can do that all in one shot. That's incredible to me. With the Movi Pro, I can change frame rate, white balance, shutter speed, basically any camera setting from either the Movi controller or the Mimic. It's all perfectly integrated, and it really simplifies the whole process.
Also, the integrated power option completely streamlined a lot of different aspects to the workflow, so that we were able to concentrate on one thing instead of 4 or 5. Our gaffer on this was Brian Stansfield, and he really brought the production to a completely different level. He just kept adding in all of these colors. It was incredible to kind of go through these layers of red and then green and then blue and then black, or vice versa.
There's going to be a lot of things changing just in the way that you could creatively use and move lights.
I think that we're right at the beginning of seeing who kind of takes this to the next level and then just keeps adding more and more levels of complexity to something that is we just haven't really seen.
Was that one cool or what? You guys like that one? So for me personally, as a cinematographer and a shaper of light, like, what a better tool than using a drone in the sky to shape the light down. And the possibilities are endless. We could discuss more later, but I want to just kind of blow through some of the last slides here and move on towards the Q&A. I do want to give props to a couple other drone photographers or aerial cinematographers here in Oregon who are way better than I am, and I don't know why they didn't get asked to teach this workshop, but this guy, his name is Michael. I don't know his last name off the top of my head, but Google Rise, an Oregon aerial journey. It's the most beautiful video, and it's only like 4 minutes long, so it's worth a look. And then this is actually a friend out in the Tillamook area. He put together this Exploring Oregon 1.0 aerial, and it's got like 100,000 hits on it on YouTube, so it's obviously a popular video too. You'll see why if you Google it. Again, all these slides are going to be on the internet on my website, so I'm moving pretty fast, but they're there for you to peruse later. The concept of storytelling is a huge part of what I am interested in with using drones. Is drones are becoming an essential tool in the bag of every cinematographer, especially for those establishing shots and closing shots. I think almost every video that I make now has at least one drone shot in it. Yeah,
No perspective.
yeah,
That's what we're gonna do.
the wow factor, right? It just gives it that pop. So yeah, I'll move on. We were just talking about this. Drones kind of have like a robotic feel to them. The gimbal is so perfect, and the GPS, it's almost a little too perfect. So we were talking about the cable cams. They were running through the forest. Like, why couldn't you just have run a drone through the forest? Where they were actually, if you did see the light on the drone running through the forest, carefully weaving through the trees, but I feel like they probably did the cable cam for that more organic feel because it had a little bounce to it, and there's different movements you can do. Helicopters, traditionally, obviously have more vibration to the shots and more movement, unless the camera's on the helicopter on a gimbal, which sometimes they are. I think Cineflex, right? Yeah, that's amazing. So I think basically as an aerial cinematographer, what my decision comes down to mostly is budget. But if I have big budgets, I would be making the decision between helicopter versus drone, just because of the different feels. The other positives I'm going to throw out there, obviously drones can go places helicopters can't. But on the other note, helicopters do have more speed and definitely more range than drones. So just have to touch on that, although most of us probably will never have the opportunity to shoot from a helicopter. So I'm going to go through some cinematography shots. These are kind of some of my own made up names, so don't quote me. Hey, that's not what that shot's called, but whatever. These are kind of classic shots that I've used in my cinematography. There's probably hundreds more that you can create and make up yourself. So we'll go with the reveal. Let you guys watch that. And that's revealing a foreground object while moving forward. And this is for actually Clint's video. He was here a little bit ago. He's gone now, but his music video is coming out soon, and we have a whole bunch of drone shots, including that one in it. Reverse reveal. So that's revealing an object into the foreground while carefully moving backwards. And I will say this, carefully plan in advance what will be behind your drone, and keep line of sight on your drone. It is a very common shot to crash on. And I have crashed before. On the crashing note, let me just say this. It's not a matter of if you'll crash, it's a matter of when you'll crash.
Pretty much,
Yeah, so get ready for that. And Terry was witness to my first crash, and I came in pretty much traumatized after a 2-week spell of not even looking at the drone, and bringing him the broken drone and him saying, it's actually not that bad. And I tell that to most people who crash with their phones that first time. These things are pretty sturdy. Okay, so this is a reverse reveal ascend, what I call. It's basically reverse revealing an object into the foreground while ascending. Yeah, like a jib shot, exactly. Crane shot. Again, another very important shot to plan carefully, making sure you know what's behind you. Okay, and the classic God's eye view, which is becoming just such an amazing way to look at the world above us. And with this one, you can have the camera flying in any direction, just keeping the camera pointed down, and it makes for amazing, ways to compose shots. Sean and I were out in the wilderness recently, with Sean as the DP and me as the drone operator, and he was telling me which way to move the camera so that we were getting like the fog lined up from the left to the right, and as we're moving, he's like, keep it framed left to right, keep it framed left to right, you know. So like having another operator can help for moments like those when all I'm doing is focusing on flying the dang thing.
Sometimes that's fairly essential, right? You have one person who's the pilot, one person that's directing the shots. Not long ago, these weren't accessible, and we have two pilots. We have somebody flying the drone, somebody operating the camera, and then, in my case, I'd stand in the middle and try and direct both to collaborate.
Alright. So orbit's actually a fun one. Of course, flying around an object in a circular flight pattern is one of the auto-programmable features on these drones. There's about 4 or 5 different functions on this one right here that you can move, do automatically. I think the Mavic has a few more. It's not recommended in my boat to rely on those automatic. I did that shot handheld. Let's watch it again. You can see that it's kind of a little bit jerky. Like there's some subtle movements that are obviously not robotic. And personally, as a cinematographer, I like that better. I don't want my shots to look really robotic. I want them to have that organic feel, so it fits in with the rest of the footage. But you have to get really good to do a shot like that and practice. I would say don't rely on your auto feature first. Practice manually, and then use the auto if you're in a situation where you just absolutely have to use it. Do you guys remember that shot? Oh wait, before I show you that, do you remember the shot in the Oregon version 2 where it was God's eye view of the freeway and it was twisting? I might have that one in here, but anyways, that was actually an auto shot. They did that for a reason. Okay, so orbit follow. This is again a very manual shot, which you can do auto, but I did it manually because see how I didn't go in a complete circle. I was actually focusing on the people, and the boat was moving, so the auto wouldn't. I don't really know how to do the auto orbit with the boat moving. Oh yeah, this is the one I was talking about. God's eye twist. Okay, that's what I called it. So twisting the drone around while the camera is pointed down, and then doing auto orbit.
Explain this a little bit more because it's like a time lapse. So how slow was this thing?
It's actually a very, very slow shot that I just sped up to like 300%. So it was it took like 2-3 minutes to get that shot. And I wanted it to be a more robotic looking shot, just like it was on a slider or something. And I think those are really cool. And I think if you know when you want to use a shot like that in your storytelling, it's great. But personally, I think sticking with manual is probably better for safety too. Okay, so the pan orbit chase. This is one of my favorite shots of all time. Pat was there. He's the one skiing or in the boat. We were, he wanted me to chase the boat while panning around it. I'd never even done anything like that. We pulled it off, and it started while flying backwards. You can see that. That was the hardest shot I've ever done. We pulled it off. Totally manual. Alright, and then, let's see, a couple more. The fly-by twist. So this is a great one for actually using an auto mode on, and the auto mode, I actually didn't use auto mode on this one, but the one I would have used is called waypoint feature, where you just tell the drone to go from point A to point B. You actually have to fly to program it. You have to fly to point A and then fly to point B, and then say set. And then you go back to point A and then you say play. And it'll just fly the drone from point A to point B, and then you can rotate the camera smoothly and not have to worry about. Actually, you can see in my shot why I would have wanted to use that feature, because look at the end here, look how, see it was kind of, the speed was a little off, a little jerky. Again, I prefer that, but if you were wanting that subject to stay perfectly centered, you'd want to use your auto waypoint feature on that. A couple more here. My favorite thing now that I'm getting a little bolder as a pilot is flying through things. Although be very, very, very careful. It's a great way to crash. And as you can see, I almost did crash. Yes. So this was done on my drone that did not have obstacle avoidance. The newest drones, as you can see, have sensors in the front that will literally, if you turn that feature on, it will stop your drone. And then they also have sensors on the bottom. to help with the ground judgment, so you can't crash it into the ground. The newest one has reverse sensors, that's what I avoided with that feature. Alright, so let's see. And then, okay, so ascend, I want to say something about ascend. This seems like a simple, no-brainer shot, but notice how there is something going down in the shot as I'm going up. That parallax effect is a great technique. I don't know if you saw Store Oregon 1, but I had a shot panning a bridge while a biker was going this way and the train was going that way. So two things kind of passing by each other makes for a fantastic feel to the image. So watching for that when you're filming. And then descending. Now, this is a really important thing to know about descending. Terry's actually the one that introduced me to this. Prop wash. So when you're descending, your props are going to give you a wash effect, and it's going to jerk the camera around. I feel like it's, in the 2 years that I've been flying, it's practically impossible to descend smoothly. But what Terry told me is film going up, and then in post-production reverse the shot. So that's what this shot is. And you can watch it again. Now watch at the beginning. Watch how there's a car going backwards. I put that in there on purpose to show you guys what we were running to. So luckily, the rest of the shot had nothing in it that was going backwards, but you'll need to pay attention to that. There will be things that you will want to avoid, so wait until nothing's in the shot. Oh, okay. Alright, and then, okay, so here's another way to do the descend. Is, you can descend immediately going forward without getting that prop wash in any direction. Cool. And so yeah, so if you're like, oh, I want to descend, but I could go forward a little bit, then you don't have to reverse that shot. And here's a reason why you would want to do that. Look at the train coming out. I obviously wanted that train moving forward, not backwards. So I had to figure out a way to descend and capture that without having to do the reverse thing. Cool. Alright, and then this is the last one, and I want to hear your guys' opinion on this, but 3 movements in one is technically very disorienting for your audience. I've heard that you should not use that unless you have a really good reason. For example, like you want to create a negative feeling or emotion to be portrayed in your, or you want to disorient your audience, like they're feeling lost or disoriented. This one was simply just to stylize the shot, kind of. It was actually the opening shot for a teaser trailer for a wedding video I did, and I just wanted it to have some bling bling, and so I did it like that. But really, you really do need to be careful when you have 3 movements in your shot. And so that one had, it was moving forward, it was twisting and ascending all at the same time. It's kind of hard for the normal audience to really take that in. Alright, so I'm just going to blow through some of these slides. Can you guys read those okay? Alright, I'll just read a little bit. It's not a matter of when, if you crash, it's a matter of when, and most likely that will be because you're using autoflight. So just, know that about the autoflight. And here's a list of the autoflights that my drone has. It's waypoints, orbit, chase an object, and you can touch the screen and it'll pick out the object and then follow it. Follow me, so it'll follow your controller. So if you're like running or biking, you're technically not supposed to be driving, but people do it anyways. And then the other one is tap fly, so you can press on the screen where you want it to fly and it'll just go. That one, I hate using that one. It does not respond the way I like it to respond. So moving on, stylization. This is what we worked on together a lot when we were shooting together. Just watching your composition, your rule of thirds while you're flying. Making sure that you're keeping things in the frame aesthetically beautiful and not like just focusing too much on the flying. So that's what takes a long time to get good at is you want to obviously be a good pilot, but as you get into it further and the cinematography becomes more important to you, you're going to want to make sure that your stuff is looking accurate and good according to like good cinematography rules. And then I also wanted to say too, like a body of work that you can put together, especially for drone films, is you're going to want to have a theme, and every artist has a theme to their body of work too, so keep that in mind with your work while you are learning to shoot. Production value, I'll just say this, location. Like what you put in front of the camera is everything, especially what time of day you're shooting, trying to capture that golden hour lighting or blue hour or light beams or sun flares or reflections or shadows on the ground, stuff like that, so pay attention to that. Also, Flying slowly is really, really important because you can fly fast, but it's even better to fly slow and then speed the shot up. Because one, there's some issues with frame skipping with these drones, and if you fly slower, you won't get that. Also, you're probably just safer to fly slow. The faster you fly, the more likely you are to crash. Camera choice. I say camera doesn't matter. As long as you're paying attention to all the other things, and there's a myriad of things that go into cinematography, you can get really decent shots on a Phantom 4 or even a Mavic. I would say just focus on all the other things first, and as you get better, of course, like the best carpenter is not going to use the cheapest hammer, and the best cinematographer is not going to use the cheapest camera, but when you're somewhere in between and you're just learn all the other things that it takes to do that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I don't know about you, Sean, but I get asked all the time, what camera do you shoot with? And I don't even answer that question anymore. It's like, it doesn't even matter. Just practice, get good. But I do shoot with the Phantom 4. As far as color correction go, it's really important to shoot in the flattest color profile you can to get that higher dynamic range. And I think on the DJI it's called S-Log. Is that correct? Settings, I'm going to just leave this one up because there's a bunch to go over with settings. Aperture is fixed on these drones, so that basically, long story short, aperture is fixed, shutter needs to stay fixed due to needing to double your frame rate. So ISO is your only variable when you're flying, and when you're flying during the day, it's going to be at 100. So you have no variables except an ND filter. And so I recommend, making sure you get a good ND filter set, which brings me to my ND filter slide. And Polar Pro is a good company to buy from. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit more during the QA. Polarizers are also another handy thing to use to make your skies look a little more blue and gradiated. You can get an ND filter polarizer combo now, which is great because these drones don't allow stackable filters because it just makes the gimbal drop. Insurance. I wanted to make sure we talked about insurance. I've been working really hard on this in my business, and it's difficult. Nobody wants to insure drones right now, especially as more and more accidents are happening, and somebody just crashed into a plane the other day. So these things are scaring off insurance companies, and it's very expensive. But here's my options, and I'll just tell you what I know, and there's probably a lot more out there to know about. But DJI does provide basic coverage when you first buy your drone. You can't get it after your initial sale. I don't know about the other companies. Maybe these guys can talk about that later. They only cover the cost of the drone though, and they don't cover any liability or anything else. And then once you've sent it back for drone repairs or day replacement or whatever, for the value of the drone, you're done. And that's it. So you have to buy a new drone to get new coverage. This picture up here is of an app on the phone called Verifly. They do a pay-per-flight liability insurance for up to $10 million, and it starts at $10 an hour, so it's great. Another one I've heard for actual insurance plans is skyviewstech.com. SKYVUZETECH. They have drone insurance, and a colleague of mine has a plane that he's covered with liability for up to $1 million, and his gear is actually insured up to $18,000, and he flies with the Inspire 2 and actually even an octocopter, which holds the red, and other cameras like that. And so his plan costs like $2,400 a year, which is about $200 a month. Hi guys, how are you? So that's good to know. If you need specific coverage, I do have an amazing insurance agent that I'm working with right now called the Moyes Elite Group, and his info is up there. And if you can't read it, it's going to be on my website, so just go to ryanao.com. In a couple days, I'll have this all up, and there will be a link there. And he does, of course, he has a blog addressing drone insurance. Michael is a drone lawyer, or expert in the drone law area, and he has a blog about drone law, which I'll let him talk about in a little bit. Just Really important though, I want to say about safety. Here's some of the basic safety rules. Don't fly over people. That's an FAA regulation now. So as you saw in my first film, there was a shot over people. That was 2 years ago before I knew these rules. Well, actually before these rules came into place. This is fairly recent, I think, within the past 6 months that they've made the no fly over people. No fly near airports has been there forever. So within 5 miles you do need permission, and within 1 mile it's a no fly zone. And I just want to throw out there too, watch out for birds. I've been attacked by a bird before, and I felt bad for the bird because I saw a feather fly away, and like, oh man, he got clipped. So what I did basically is I just flew the drone quickly out of his territory and talked to some birders that were in there, and they were saying that that bird was being territorial and would not have stopped attacking the drone until he hurt himself or the drone crashed. So it's in your best interest, in the bird's interest, just land the drone safely and go away. It's not gonna stop doing that. Yeah, so there's the app, and by the way, when you click on let's say you're within that yellow area, that means you're within 5 miles and you do need to call the airport for permission. This app hovers great because if you click on the airport, it gives you the phone number of the tower, and you do need to call and get permission. It's kind of a pain in the butt, to be honest. So I would recommend plan your flights out, call in advance, because I had to wait for an hour once in the middle of waiting to do a flight. It's just, come on guys, get back to me. But they're slammed, so they will take a while. And then let me just mention the FAA, which you guys wanted to mention too. You do need to be commercial licensed to make money. I'm a hobbyist, I'm not licensed, so I've never made money. My films don't plan to make any money, but I do want to make money someday, so I'm going to take that test, which is a very difficult test. So, FYI. Legalities, we'll pull this up when Michael's talking about it, but basically it's a big gray area right now about privacy issues. I'll let Michael speak to that more. And then it's just to wrap up the presentation, there's some great slides in here with some awesome information about some things I think are where drones are going. Like this bladeless drone design, we need that, don't we? No more blades. Somebody invented this, and it's gonna come out sometime in the future, so keep your eyes out for that. Drones are doing things like helping people in war zones with medical help, and even in America with like getting there before the EMTs can and dropping a bag. That's pretty cool. Each life-saving help, they're actually sending drones out to save people before the lifeguards can get there. It's pretty cool. And then have you guys heard about what Intel's doing with they did it at the Super Bowl a couple years ago, I think. Swarm, yeah, like a ton of drones all synchronized with lights and synchronizing to the music. So yay, Intel. Good job. So yeah, so that's the gist of the presentation part. I want to open it up to Q&A, and if there's any slides I can jump to help, just let me know.
I was just curious if that presentation is going to be available on your website.
Yeah, it is. Give me a couple days. RyanAO.com. I would scroll down to the blog section. It'll be right there as a blog entry, and maybe even a link at the top for a little while.
A couple questions for the legal guy. The flying over people thing, is that like directly over people? Because I mean, if you're in a city, it's almost impossible to fly somewhere where you're not somewhere near people. And also, does that also include flying over vehicles, people in vehicles? And then sort of a secondary question, the commercial line. So if you do drone work for somebody that you don't get paid for, but it's going to be in a film that may make some money,
Yeah, let me start broadly by saying we were talking before we got started, and and I'll echo something that Brian said. It's really Wild West right now, and gray areas. I mean, even putting it like mildly. I mean, it's just there's all kinds of rules that technically you could be violating at any time flying a drone, but. I mean, not putting Ryan on the spot, but like the majority of the footage that we saw there was probably obtained in a hyper-technical sense, illegally. But the question is sort of like, and I don't mean to make light, but there's like statutes on the books, like in New York, you can't feed squirrels on Sundays or something weird, like, it's passed in 1800s. Nobody's enforcing the law, nobody's bothering. Is it illegal? Well, it becomes sort of a question of, not really, because you're not going to get in any trouble. Fagin and Oliver Twist, right? It's only illegal if you get stealing if you get caught. So, but going back to your question, as far as flying over people, I don't think that you're going to ever. We were talking before we got started. The FAA is not running around looking at these things. They're not targeting people for flying over people. I will say something I saw earlier this year, which was interesting. For the very first time, I was over at in Cannon Beach, and for the very first time I saw real heavy use of signs, no drones near Haystack Rock. And previously, I mean, just even that same beach, like a year earlier, no signs whatsoever.
Yeah, I got shots of Haystack a year ago.
So you're going to start seeing a lot more restrictions that say you just can't fly here, period. And then if you were flying over people or cars or anything, it's not going to matter. There's going to be a national park ranger or somebody's going to, have a problem with it. As far as, you asked another question about commercial and hobbyist, that's another interesting thing, is in a hyper-technical sense, if you're filming like for a project, I read that as it's commercial, and you need to take the test, and you need to pass it and be certified and all this. But I shot some footage last year unrelated to drones for marketing purposes, my law firm. And I'll just tell you a real quick story because I don't have a ton of time, but when the guy that I was shooting with had his Sony mirrorless camera and just like one prime lens, no problem. We went and filmed. The minute that we had somebody else out there with a reflector, he's had his like Ronin gear, all this stuff, security guards start showing up. They're like, "Oh, are you filming something commercial?" And that's a really weird way to put it, but the point is that the more you look like you're filming for a project, or the more you look like you're filming for something commercial, more likely is you're going to attract attention, and somebody's going to come and may shut you down. And I think if Ryan's out there dressed as he is right now, he looks like anybody in Oregon, right? And if he's out there flying his drone, having a good time, nobody's going to have a problem and come out and ask him for any sort of licensing or anything like that. But I think that if you were out like some of these crews that we saw on the other footage, and it looks like you're filming something for production, you're much more likely to get in trouble. But what we were talking about before we got started is, I think he's not aware of anybody who's even been cited by the FAA, except for if you have, what did you say? Yeah, you could tell that story, but a couple dozen, drones or something like that, maybe somebody's going to raise a red flag. One last thing I do want to mention, I do primarily criminal offense, and that's my interest in drones is we're going to eventually start seeing invasion of privacy, reckless endangering type charges with drones. Hasn't happened yet. I haven't had a client hire me because their drone crashed on somebody, but it's just a matter of time till that's going to happen, especially as they start to be more frequently used. And so what you would have if your drone, say the battery's conked out or there was some sort of problem and it fell on people, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but just to let you know kind of one reason you do want to stay away from crowds. If that drone were to plop down on people, reckless endangering's a possibility, assault, and most people would think that's really strange because I didn't mean to hurt anybody, but you could have an assault based on a reckless theory, like you should have known better. So like with these drones, if their battery power is going to quit on you, and it were to happen to fall from the sky, that's the kind of problem you'd be looking at.
I'll just touch on it real quick. We obviously interact with a ton of people on a daily basis, and we work with a bunch of companies. Really, the only people the FAA is directly going after, as he was saying, are big companies utilizing a bunch of drones and kind of pushing the boundaries of what you should be operating at. In terms of, we encourage everyone to get Part 107 certified because, it's relatively inexpensive to go to a class and then go take a test and have your license, and it opens up the flying possibilities. That 5-mile no-fly zone for hobbyists is basically any airfield. It can be in operation, it can be not in operation, it can be a helipad where they do emergency landings, it can be a crop dusting field. If you look at a map that includes any airfield, you're really limited in where you can actually legally fly. With Part 107, uncontrolled airspace has different ruling for you. So you can operate closer, you have to monitor common frequencies, you have to look out for traffic yourself, but you're allowed to operate, let's say, right at a crop dusting landing zone, right? You'd be allowed to, whereas a hobbyist can't. So that's one of the reasons. In terms of over people, it's written, do not fly over people who are not directly in the operation. So it's a weird gray area, right? It's super interpretive. Does that mean if you notify someone, like, hey, we're filming overhead, that they're now become a part of the operation? Does that mean that if they're an actor involved, they're part of the operation? Does that mean they have to be wearing helmets and other safety equipment? It's super vague, and we've had every bit of that interpretation used. In my opinion, if the people are aware of the operation, you make them notified, they know there's a drone flying overhead, you've kind of done your duty, but in the eyes of the law, it could be totally interpreted in a different way.
Let me clarify. Are you referring to a different thing than the FAA regulation of don't fly over groups of people?
Yeah, so in Part 107, there's a subsection that says actually don't fly over people or property that are not directly involved in the operation of the aircraft. But again, it's super interpretive. So my opinion is, in the sense of flying over cars, those people are probably pretty safe inside the vehicle. In terms of flying over people, you obviously want to, at a minimum, notify them and then stay away from groups and crowds and stuff like that. The verbiage has changed very significantly from the original set in the new guidelines from the Part 33 exemption process and now the Part 107, and it could change tomorrow and the next day and so on and so forth. So it's really just a matter of covering yourself by doing what you feel is the max you can.
So I was at a concert at Bridgeport and just had this going out in the open and they had drones flying capturing this whole thing.
Super illegal. Yeah. Pretty much every concert venue, open venue like that, it's crazy illegal. Because even if they have permission from the owners of the venue and the concert operators and they had insurance and everything else, there's an expectation that every single person in the crowd is not giving consent to be operating underneath the drone. If they had a crash and chopped somebody's arm off or cut something really bad, there'd be no way of saying that they were involved in the operation.
There's actually one other thing I was going to mention. There are probably some better apps, but I downloaded an app in preparation for this presentation called AirMap, and it on your phone it tells you where you can fly and where you can't fly. You can't fly over public sporting events. That's like a no-fly zone. And I think that in the future you're going to see even more. There probably will be enforcement of that because people are going to get nervous the first time there's sort of a weaponized drone or there's like a terrorist attack or somebody scoping out a situation. It's going to be very prohibited to fly over groups of people.
Can I speak to one thing too? I just want you all to be aware, CNN just got permission from the FAA to fly their drones over people. So you might start seeing that.
Yeah, it's a waiver process, so it's possible to get permission, but 95% of those circumstances you're not seeing the proper application process for using that. Somebody comes up to you to say, hey, I want to hire you to fly at a concert. Your first thing should be, I can't fly directly over the venue. Meaning if you have a camera with adaptable lenses and you can fly a tiny bit distance away and get that photography not over the venue, that might be a solution. But as he was saying, is most of those venues are no-fly zones altogether. And you can check NOTAMs. The app that Ryan was using, Hover, is really great. Before You Fly is an app that the FAA puts out. It's not nearly as great, but it's their official app. As well as Air Maps. It's kind of a good way to look around. The thing I'll tell you is that with Hover and a lot of the other ones, they still have the airport phone numbers on there for contact. The FAA is trying to stop that altogether. So if you take your Part 107, you'll learn they have a application waiver process website that you go to. You can look at a map and you can actually say, okay, I'm going to be flying 25 blocks away from the airport at this exact street in this corner, and you can look on a map and see the minimum established altitude. You can apply for a waiver and get automatically approved, and if it's above that you have to manually apply. But they're trying to stop all phone calls to towers because they're not equipped to handle that situation. We fly around we have another store in San Diego. We fly around San Diego airport constantly, and every single time we get permission from everyone, the FAA FSDO, the head of airport operations, the person in the tower, the actual controllers. We get permission from every single person. The cops still come. The tower still calls the police on us. We still have to do this whole process. There's just a huge disconnect between you notifying them, hey, I'm going to be flying under 300 feet at this spot at this time, and the actual air traffic controllers who are on duty, the pilots flying overhead, everybody getting that information shared. So the FAA actually makes a process, and then in their computer they'll have a record of it taking place so that every single person who's on duty will know.
Just curious, what are the fees for becoming an official flying for Part 107 certified? And also, what are the fine fees if you not abide?
So the fines range. It's huge range depending on what you violated and how you violated. They fine people. I think the highest fine was over $1 million. The lowest fine was somewhere in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. But again, these aren't fines to you. This is a fine to a company. Like the big fine was a company in New York that operated 25 drones. They had tons of footage all over the 400-foot mark, all in restricted flight areas, all over helipads that was published. So the FAA could say, here's 80 times you violated the law. So it's not something an individual maybe would worry about as much. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but it is for the licensing. Just depends on the testing center you go to. For an actual test with the FAA, it's from $150 to $170 depending on where you take it. You can self-study for it. Obviously we teach classes, so I tell people I recommend taking the class, but the self-study pass rate's about 60%, whereas if you take a class, it's 100% success rate so far. So you go, you take a test, you don't pass the $160, you're throwing away another $160 to the FAA. So I recommend people take a class, whether it's from us or there's a PDX drone universities or a couple other places doing it. But
How much do classes cost?
depends on which one you take, but about $250. So. And then there's one that's the PDX Drone Academy. We also sell their courses. Theirs are $400, but it includes your testing costs. So, you know, it's a part of it.
One other thing to mention, just when we're talking about like where to fly, where not to fly, and fines and all that, I think a lot of people would be surprised to see, aside from airports, nuclear power stations, schools, stadiums, all that kind of stuff, heliports are like the biggest problem. Because if you look at a map of downtown Portland, you think, oh, it'd be no problem to get some nice shots of the river or bridges. There are so many little teeny tiny heliports, and most of them are just never used, but they show up as prohibited areas. I think you're supposed to notify them, give them a call. Maybe you're not supposed to do that, but just be aware of that.
So yeah, so that's one of the benefits of having your license is if you don't have your license, you can't fly there. Period. The notification process doesn't matter because it's an uncontrolled tower. If you have a license and it's uncontrolled, meaning there's a common air frequency that everyone uses when you're coming to land at on that helipad, you're not notifying guys in the building who have a radio, you're just notifying other traffic, hey, I'm coming in for a landing here. You're allowed to operate right there at that helipad. You just have to stay on the same frequency they are in terms of monitoring traffic. So it's a huge benefit. I mean, really, if you look at a map that includes everything, it's super hard to fly anywhere near any populated city. Like, it's pretty much, you can't fly anywhere, but as soon as you get your Part 107, it's really just like, as he was saying, some of the major spots like nuclear power plants, professional football stadiums, as well as major airports, stuff like that.
And there are no-fly zones around like military bases and some government buildings.
All the big stuff, yeah.
Yeah, question. Yeah, for Michael or legal. So as a photographer, I get release forms from people I'm working with and stuff. Would you do anything, add anything to that for drone if you want to use that?
It's funny you ask that because I'm an Android guy, but my wife's really into Apple products, and we have on at home, we have these screensavers on, and I've always wondered how Apple got these. They're screensavers where they've taken drones and flown over major cities, and you look down and they're really detailed, like, I don't know if they're 4K or what, but you can see enough information that a car is like identifiable. You can't see people, you can't like recognize a face, but you can look at the car and completely tell whose car it is. And I've always wondered, how did they get that footage? Because they couldn't obviously get releases from Manhattan. So I wouldn't bother with that. I think what I would be nervous about, and this is really weird the way Oregon law is, the only real privacy issue you're going to have is if you I saw some of the footage that he had and was looking to see if this was even like just as a talking point, like in the realm of possibilities, if you could see into the windows, because he had some footage where he flew by a building and there's some windows there, and thankfully they're very opaque and you can see reflections, so there's nothing. Any person inside that building who has a reasonable expectation of privacy, that's where all of a sudden you're going to have a problem. And if they're engaged, God forbid, in any sexual activity, it's more of a problem. It goes from second degree to first degree. Being there and watching it as opposed to recording, it's another distinction in Oregon law too. So if you flew your drone by and you're not recording, but you're just looking at your screen, that's different than you're making a recording and then all of a sudden you start playing it. I wouldn't bother getting a release if I was flying, I think the sweet spot's like 100 to 500 feet is probably where you want to be, and at that distance I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of detail in faces. But if you were flying on private property or with somebody's permission, close to people, then I'd be getting releases from anybody in any project that you're going to put together.
My question more is, I'm working with somebody else flying within like 200 feet, or actually within 50 feet. Should I get a release for them for liability? Like I do, like I've had certain sets set up in my photography and stuff. I get a liability in case a stand hits them or something like that.
Oh! I thought you were talking about really so their face. Yeah.
Like if they know that they're acknowledging that they're coming getting into a situation where I'm using a piece of equipment that could possibly injure me.
That certainly wouldn't hurt. Yeah, I mean that might be a little bit over the top because but I mean that's something where like your attorney would say this would be a good idea, but if you listen to every good idea your attorney gives you, you're never going to get your project off the ground. But sure, it wouldn't hurt to have one. Yeah.
Yeah, so for us, when we've done it before, if we're flying small equipment like Phantom 4, Mavic, something like that, we generally don't worry about it. I mean, only because the risk is relatively low unless you're flying very high and traveling very fast during most of the shots. But when we've used bigger equipment, S900s, 900mm frames, 1000mm, something carrying a red, that's the first thing we do. We get everybody to sign off because God forbid it crash. I mean, the aircraft weighs so much it could cause some serious damage to them. And then just touching on the privacy thing, we've done a lot of shooting with cruise ships, and that's a huge thing we have to deal with, is that when we're doing close flybys from cruise ships, more of a problem as we get better mics and better equipment. And then I forgot to mention when you asked about the commercial use, talking to a lot of FAA FSDO people, we have a store in Erie, Pennsylvania that's on an international airport where we do training, and we have direct communication with the FAA. And basically what they told me is if you want to be safe, there has to be no commercial application at all in any sense, meaning, you know, people have gotten in trouble, they shoot their family vacation, they throw it on YouTube, they accidentally check the monetization button, and when somebody watched it, they're seeing a pre-roll ad, that's commercial. Technically, even, you know, this footage here, he did it completely for fun, it's free, he didn't pay anything for it, nobody paid for it, but it's now here at a seminar where people are paying money to get admission. The FAA can stretch that. To act like it's commercial use. You know, I tell people, a lot of people, their neighbor's selling their house, or two people down the street are selling their house, and as a favor, they've owned a drone forever. They go down there, they shoot some pictures, right? It's free. It's from them to their neighbor. Their neighbor hands that off to the realtor throws it up on the website. Now those pictures are used in the sale of the house. Again, I don't think the FAA is going after this little hanging fruit. It's not something to really be concerned about, but when you're talking about it on a bigger scale, when you start releasing projects that, you know, were free when you made them, but may end up down the way making money, I mean, it's an easy thing to get your license, just get it and get it out of the way so you don't have to worry about it.
One other thing I want to mention, this is more just a fun story, because when we were looking at his footage, I mentioned to Ryan that Old Town Portland sign, that Made in Oregon sign. The city owns that, and if you've heard about the stories, if you get a sticker like with that sign on it, the city wants a piece of it, and they charge a tax. So we filmed, this guy that I was working with 2 years ago, we filmed a video, and I'm in the US Bank Court Tower building is where my office is, and we wanted some footage of it coming up from the river, looking out at the bridge, and then you see the building in the background, that sign's over in the corner. We had to check with the city of Portland to see if we could use that video footage because that sign's in there, and they've been really prominent in going after people who use that sign without authorization. In our situation, it turns out they said if you're selling legal services, that's fine. But if we were selling that as like, it was like a tourist video or something like that, the city actually wanted us to buy a license, depending on what we were going to use that video for. The rate changed, and so I was surprised to learn that, because it was like right here. It's a sign. I mean, anybody can see it and they can drive by it. You mean I have video footage of I got to pay somebody for it. So.
Do you have any idea what the rate was?
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but it was like it was a couple $100, and it was more than I wanted to pay for a split-second piece of footage in the project I was working on.
On that note, and then I want to let Sean talk about kids and drones for a sec. I just want to say that I was involved in some shoots with McDonald's, and we were shooting from the ground but getting the Space Needle in it, and they wouldn't let me use the footage because they didn't want to pay the city of Seattle or whoever owned the Space Needle for the royalty fees that they're not charging for using imagery in any commercial footage for the Space Needle. And that brought up that issue, so I started Googling, and I found all kinds of information out there that because of drones, now people that shoot on the ground and in the air are now having to suffer from all these businesses that are trying to cash in on their buildings being used in video footage, which is happening more and more because of aerial cinematography. So be aware. That's why I have not touched trying to make money off of this, because I know the moment I step into that, even with my FAA license, I'm still going to have to pay royalties. Oh, yeah, now you know. So I wanted to let Sean speak for just a minute or two or whatever on what he's been doing, getting kids involved in drones, and specifically would love to hear what kinds of drones you're having them use to get involved, because how do kids learn how to fly? I get asked that all the time. In fact, I'll be after the workshop sticking around until at about 4 o'clock, meeting here with some kids. So if you all have kids that want to meet me, I'll be here talking to a few of them, and you can meet them too.
Yeah, so we teach all sorts of storytelling all over the Columbia Gorge. We're based right outside of Hood River, and we found this to be just an amazing tool to introduce to the youth as a visual storytelling tool, right? I just said tool twice. But yeah, so with that, obviously, there's a whole lot to deal with liability. There's a whole lot to deal with safety and everything. So we've actually taken it to the point where we'll bring in operators that are experienced, licensed, and working in the field, and they'll fly, and we'll turn the kids into directors, right? So they'll be there directing the shot, making it happen. We don't actually let them take control at this point, but it is opening up an opportunity for them to get kind of like that extra edge in their own pursuits. That it's letting them grasp that new technology, newish technology, and take it wherever they want. Because at this point, you can get a $500 Spark, and so it's very accessible. But it has been pretty incredible to see their vision of this, because to them it's just the norm. It's just what they're growing up with, right? To us, it's pretty darn new. So it's pretty amazing.
So I have a question. I was watching Cinechopper is like a really well-known guy who teaches about drone cinematography on YouTube. He was on a workshop that I was watching the other day online, and he was saying, and I'd never thought of this, that the best way to get involved in shooting drone, if you're interested, is to get a non-GPS drone. And they have these little tiny ones that you can fly inside your house even on Amazon for like $50. And he was saying just learn that, and if you can learn that you could actually then easier fly one of these even with GPS, because with GPS these are much easier to fly than those little ones.
Yeah.
And would you recommend that for people starting to get in?
Yeah, we started like our like training aircraft platforms start at like sub $30, and they go up from there to like 99. But yeah, we recommend either if you're ready to buy and ready to pull a trigger, get your main drone and then a small drone. For a lot of reasons. One, they're more difficult to fly, but one of the biggest things is that you can afford more battery packs. They charge faster. You can fly them more frequently and in more places, which gives you a lot more practice. The big thing that's going to make you better is stick time. And if you buy a Phantom and you have a battery that takes an hour to charge and you get 15 to 20 minutes of flight time out of it, and you need to be in a nice big clear open area where you're not going to hurt anybody and you're not going to be over buildings or near a helipad, it can be difficult to get 100, 200, 300 hours of practice. If you buy a small toy drone that you can fly in your front yard, you can buy 10 batteries for, they all charge in an hour, you get a ton of practice. So we do recommend that. The GPS thing is, we also sell ones that have GPS as training. They're still more difficult to fly because they're small and a little more nimble and stuff like that. But the one advantage they have is in the event of you lose track of it, it gets blown away when you're completely lost, you can push a button and it will come back to where it started and land. So that's obviously an advantage. But yeah, you start out super cheap. If you crash it, worst case scenario, even if you ruin it, you're sub $50 in expense, versus if you crash a Phantom 4, just the camera alone can be $400 to replace,
I know about that. So we got the 5-minute wrap-up call about a minute ago. Is there any last questions or anything wants to be spoken to? Yes, right here.
Cinematically speaking, do you think it's possible using a drone to get an inside shot of an elevator from outside?
I actually showed you one. Did you guys see that? Well, okay, so maybe we're talking about different things. Let me just show you what I've had in my presentation, which was the ascend shot. Did you see this? So I'm following a glass elevator moving up. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
You're talking about close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I did that in the Marriott in Tigard because they asked me to for fun. They were just like, he was kind of like, Michael, like, I'm interested in drones, and he saw me with my drone one day. He's like, come inside, and so we just played around with it, and we matched it to the elevator. But as far as going from inside the elevator to out, That would be a challenging shot. Yeah, maybe just handhold it and then let it go. Yeah, good idea. Anybody else? Anybody up here have any last comments? Oh, I do want to say one thing that we were going to touch upon, which is DIY drones. We mentioned that because I get asked a lot, like, should I just build my own drone? Because there's these kits out there, and Terry was going to speak to that.
So everybody wants to do this as cheap as possible. Back in the day, it used to be a lot cheaper to make these by yourself. Now it's not so much because the economy of scale has really kicked in. So like you were saying, the Spark's $500. You have a working camera on a working platform to fly. Usually we don't recommend radios for less than $100, and for about $500 you can cobble together and spend several months on a project to see if maybe your soldering skill are up to the task of putting one of these together. So if you're really interested in it, we can talk more about doing a do-it-yourself job. However, it is much easier and more feasible for most people to just pick one up off the shelf.
If you're trying to get a camera in the air, just buy off-the-shelf stuff. I mean, the cost is no question. There's no advantage at all. If you want to have fun, learn more, be able to repair, have something you can fly and fix, it's awesome building your own. We all do. But if you're trying to use it for cinematography, there's no point.
I'll say real quick too, with kids we're actually bringing in robotics teachers so they can build their own drones, both aerial and underwater, and we're starting to bring in cameras like GoPros and stuff on that, but that's more just for a sense of education. But I do agree with them that you probably bigger bang for your buck on these.
Thanks, you guys. And if anybody wants to speak to any of us, we can just meet you outside the tent out here because they need to wrap up and get the next workshop going in here. Thanks so much, Eric.